But he wanted to show that contrast, the weakness, the uncertainty. Superman in love looks like a regular guy in love, and that's incredibly relatable and beautiful. So I think he brought depth to the character.
Well, I guess to begin with, Ian and Peter, how did you get involved in this documentary?
Go ahead.
Well, in fact, it came to us as a project. An archival producer had made contact with you, Matthew, and established that there was indeed a great cache of film archive. And I think you three, for the first time, thought, actually, this is the right time to tell the story. And Ian and I sort of heard about this, but through our producing partners, and we jumped at it. We grew up with Christopher Reeve as Superman. We followed the story of his tragic accident and then his advocacy and activism on behalf of the disabled following his accident. It's an amazing story, and we didn't hesitate for a millisecond to jump on board and start making the film.
And why did you feel this was the right time for this story to be told?
2024 is 20 years after our dad passed away, so we figured if we were ever going to do it, now would be the time. But it's not like we were out sort of pitching a project around town or that it was a stated goal of ours. It was something we'd talked about over the years in casual conversation, and sometimes had been approached, but just never felt like the right time, and we never felt a real urgency to do it because we're all our own people with our own busy and meaningful lives, and that's what our dad and our family wanted for us anyway. So we're on the path, and we then, once this project sort of crossed our transom, we talked about it seriously for the first time and said, you know what, this would be the time to do it, but it needs to be the right time and the right team. And once we met Ian and Peter and Passion Pictures and Misfits Entertainment and our friends at Words and Pictures, we knew we had the team, and we put our full trust and belief in them, and look at what they came back with.
Doing this project, I wonder, did you end up thinking differently about your father or your mother or stepmother? Did like watching this in their lives in sort of their totality, did it change your perceptions of them?
I don't think it changed the perception, but it's a beautiful gift to get to see your parents' lives told in that totality, to have a life well lived and see that captured on screen, and to do it in its full complexity. As we were deciding, whether to do this and who to do it with, it mattered to us that it was authentic, that you see the highs and you see the lows, you see the public facade, and then you also see what's happening at home. And those true moments of joy and connection that we had throughout our lives. And all of that is captured so beautifully. And so it's a lot to share that private, moment with the rest of the world, but also just really powerful to see it told in such a beautiful way.
And yeah, it really is a gift. I mean, we're so lucky that, not only do we have like his films to look at, but we had this collection of home movies to dig up and to go through. And, we're also able to look at interviews with him on YouTube or pull things up. So, it was, I think, a question of also seeing things that I hadn't seen before. That didn't necessarily change my perception of them, but it just enhanced it by, like seeing, some rare Australian interview done in 1977 that was uploaded by someone that we got to watch I didn't know existed. Right. So it was pretty cool to see that and uncover a lot more material than we knew about.
And for me, the majority of my memories of my dad involve him after the accident, because I was not yet 3 years old when he was injured. So to see his entire life leading up until that time laid out so poetically and cinematically and authentically by our wonderful directors here has been a real gift for me, just to see that part of his life that I didn't get to experience or see for myself come to life was really impactful to me.
So I actually wanted to ask a question about the structure of the film. How did you decide the way that you were kind of tell the story to?
We always script before we start on the journey. You know, you uncover so many things when you make the film, but we always like to have a blueprint. Look, there's a massive divide in the story, obviously, between before the accident and after the accident. The accident is one tragedy. Where do you place it within a narrative structure in 3 acts? So that was one of the challenge. Do you want to start with it? Do you want to have it right in the middle? So that's one thing. Then there's another thing which, you know, I don't think we've ever talked about it, but you have Christopher Reeve standing, and then you have Christopher Reeve in a wheelchair, you know, and the way he talks post-accident, having to breathe, you know, having to let the air in and use the air to actually speak. That had the textures as well as a sort of, you know, it's could be a bit distracting for an audience. So we wanted to make sure that the structure wasn't like, oh, here's 40 odd years of his life like this, and then afterwards it's 9 years of the accident. So that was 2 of the major things we thought about. And from that, we decided to structure the way we did it. Plus, as we mentioned many times, we saw many parallels between before the accident and after the accident. We really wanted to make those connections between the Superman years and how did that actually influence the way he carried himself post-accident and the way he used, in a way, the fame and the power of what Superman meant to people to do good within his advocacy, disability advocacy, even pushing the bill. You know, it's much easier to walk up to the President of the United States of America if you're Superman, in their mind and in their culture, that if you're some just random person. And Chris was super smart, and that's one of the great things, one of our contributors, Michael, saying like how he played both side of the eye. He didn't care if you were Republican or Democrats. He had a goal. He was a man possessed on a mission. And I think that's very, very, very exciting as a filmmaker, because he just, you know, even if he couldn't move, I tell you, you couldn't get out of the way quick enough.
How quickly, I mean, obviously he was dealing with a shocking tragedy. How quickly did he sort of decide to take on this role of advocate too? In your experience?
So advocacy had been in his DNA from the beginning. So when he, you know, first came to fame, I think he knew very closely that he wanted to use that fame for a reason way before the accident. So he was active in forming the Creative Coalition and advocating and funding for the arts, for the environment. He used his platform. So he had those skills, he had those connections. Pretty quickly after the accident, I think he found that it was going to motivate him. And one of the moments that they show so beautifully in the film, his accident was in 1995. 1996, he showed up at the Oscars, and that was his first public debut. And what a public debut, right? To be on this global stage, to be received by all of his peers and colleagues. And the welcome that he got and the reception that he got, I think gave him this confidence to say, I can still be me and show myself in my new vulnerability. And there's a power that comes with that, and I want to harness that power. That was incredibly motivating, and it makes me happy that's something that's captured in the film.
The film is also very candid about his, I guess, deficiencies or limitations as a father before the accident and the transformation that his approach to parenting undertakes. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about your own experiences with that and why that was important to include in the film.
You know, obviously when someone goes through a very near-death experience and has such a transformative thing happen to them, you start to reprioritize and start to maybe rethink your approach to things, as well as being sort of physically forced to, you know, not do the active things that you're doing, but to sit and to talk more and to listen more. So it was, you know, really quite remarkable to watch that transformation, and it was something I think that, you know, we certainly benefited from, and you know, an accident like that can either really divide and break up a family, or it can bring them infinitely closer together, and that's what happened with us.
And to zoom out beyond just parenting, because we all agree he was the best dad. We loved having him as a father. We didn't care that he was famous. He was just a great dad. I think something that we learned as a family after his accident was, yes, physical presence and doing stuff together is important for a bond and for a family, but emotional presence means so much more to children, to the family unit. And just speaking to my childhood, my dad was always there. He was just there emotionally and mentally and spiritually. He was more present. And yes, some of that was forced by he couldn't do all the things that he might have done physically prior to the accident. But I think with that life-changing accident, he had to refine and redefine his priorities, as Matthew said. And we all benefited from that because the emotional presence, just showing up for people emotionally, is something we learned growing up and I think try to apply to our own lives. Matthew and Al are the best parents you could possibly imagine. It is, I don't have the words for it, as you can see, but just watching them be parents is such an honor and such a treat. And they got it from somewhere, right? And I think we all got something from him in that regard.
I wonder, why do you think people responded so positively to his work as Superman? What was it about that performance that resonated?
He made it real.
With people? Yeah.
He made it real. We don't need to go any further than that. It was a comic book that turned into a movie, and people believed it. You'll believe a man could fly. He, as Al, you say in the documentary, it mattered to him that it's like, what was it? You know, what'd you say? What did you say?
Well, that he thought about it as art, right?
Right.
There was an easy way to do that just in a caricature mode, or to think I'm just going to project strength. But he wanted to show that contrast, the weakness, the uncertainty. Superman in love looks like a regular guy in love, and that's incredibly relatable and beautiful. So I think he brought depth to the character. It makes it a fun performance to watch, but I think it also, you know, as I said in the film, this is the launching of a genre, right? How do you create what led on to, you know, the many universes we've seen since? And you need to see that human element in these fantastical characters, and that's something that really mattered to him.
I think a lot of the credit also goes to Richard Donner. I
Yeah.
mean, like his vision for that movie helped set the tone in terms of also casting that, but also working with him to shape his performance. We're quite lucky enough to have our dad's shooting script from the first film, and there's a little inscription on the inside page that says, if Superman is an uptight pain in the ass, then who gives a shit? Richard Donner, July 1977. And that, I think, was the fundamental sort of backbone of my dad's approach to the character.
I wonder, did you see The Flash, and what was your reaction to seeing his performance recreated on screen?
I didn't see it either.
No.
I think that talks to the fact that these three individuals are them. You know, they don't, you know, dad was dad. He became a public property, I'd say, like many actors when they encompass such a big role. But those guys are fantastic what they do. And I think that's what Peter and I harnessed on. When you make the film, okay, we make a biopic about Christopher Reeve. Suddenly we discover Dana Reeve, which is an amazing woman. And we was like, oh my God, she needs to be a major character in the film. And then we came across your mom guy, and he was gay. Oh my God, and what she could bring in having been there. And then you just uncover and unpeel the things, and you just, you know, it's just, he was a character he played, but he was way beyond just that. And even some of the roles he did, the film didn't get famous, but he was pretty good in it, you know. Death Trap with Michael Caine is a great film. You know, it's just the theater work and stuff. It's just, sometimes it's, you know, even looking back now, it's a pity we get typecast like this, but at the same time, that's how life is. And we have enjoyed rewatching some of the movies, even some of the TV movies of the week, as you call them. They were just really good, you know, with Kim Cattrall. But yeah, great films actually.
Are there other roles of his that you think are underappreciated that you would like people to
I'll
know?
speak to that. In our hometown of Bedford, New York, just outside the city, the local movie theater went through a rebrand a few years ago. It was the theater that I used to go to the movies with my friends and with my parents and see whatever was on, and they have rebranded it into an art house cinema. And the person in charge of that shift reached out to me and said, hey, Will, if you're ever like in the area, or if you want to be in the area, we would love to have you screen a film of your choice, of your dad's, and like we'll invite people and maybe you could say some words before and after the screening. And I responded, sure, but not Superman. We're going to do Remains of the Day. He was so proud of his role in Remains of the Day. It's not a big role. It's an important role to the film, but it's not big. But he got to show a completely different side of himself. I think he shot it the year that I was born, or it came out the year I was born, 1992. And I knew how proud he was of that. Not that he wasn't proud of Superman, not that we're not proud of all the work that he did, but just knew as I thought about it, like, oh, if he were here, he would say, no, we're not doing Superman, we're going to do Remains of the Day. So that's how I went. And actually, Jim Ivory, the writer of, and I think he also directed it, lived in the area and came just because he heard it was happening and was like, I'd like to get on stage with you and talk about Remains of the Day and talk about your dad. And it was totally unexpected and almost overwhelming for me. But that's what I think about. I don't think about the Superman films as much as I think about all the other things that he poured his passion into and got to take swings outside of this larger-than-life role that he'd already become known for.
I also wanted to ask about where things are in terms of the advocacy work that Chris did and that Dana did. Where is, what kind of progress has been made and what still needs to be made?
Well, we're incredibly proud of the legacy that way, both in terms of medical research and the advances that we've seen, but also in the broader fight for disability rights advocacy as well. The Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation is still going strong. We still run the nation's paralysis resource center, so anyone who has an injury of any kind can call and phone a friend and get the advice and the lifeline that we as a family found we so desperately needed after Dad's accident. And the medical research has had leaps and bounds. So one of the things that's captured in the film is just how hard our dad worked at physical therapy. Every day after his accident, he was pushing himself and training. And after a couple of years, he started to get some limited recovery as a result of that. The type of research and the type of efforts that led to that work have now expanded. So we see people that are getting regained function and capabilities because of this type of physical therapy. So that's a total gift to us. And then other pieces, the disability rights work, fighting for an end to caps on your lifetime insurance limits, that was a win that we ultimately got in the Affordable Care Act. Dad wasn't around to see it, but what a gift for that fighting that he was doing in the 90s and the early 2000s to get a payoff that's going to impact people around the country.
This studio is also sponsored by Audible, and I just wonder, are there podcasts that you are listening to or spoken word things that you would recommend to people?
Do we have to stay on brand?
No.
Because I think one's like a wondery thing. I love Smartless. Those guys are great. I listened to The Town by Matt Bellany. What else? Someone help me out here, guys.
I
listened to
mine
books on
involves
tape.
like children's stories. I have no
Oh,
idea.
yeah, you guys
I'm
are
sorry.
doing the
Mine's,
whole
like,
parent thing.
freaking out. And
American History Tellers by Wondery. It captures stories from our history, but does it in really beautiful, digestible ways.
Yeah.
But I think our dad's books are on Audible.
They are.
Yeah.
Right, so
And
let's
he
get
won
back
a
on
Grammy.
track.
He won a Grammy for Still Me.
Best spoken word for Still Me.
Yeah, he was just a EOT away from the EGOT.
But don't listen too much to it because there's a lot of it in the film.
Well, thank you all so much, and congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys for having us.
Thanks.